Welcome to Bicycle Retail Radio, the bicycle industry podcast that brings retailers, vendors, advocates, and thought leaders to the mic for honest discussions about the latest issues facing retailers while taking an in-depth look at the person within the profession.
One of the biggest challenges is learning to trust and delegate. We've always been a shop for 40 years where we try to do everything for everyone. We're now in roles with employees where we have certain tasks that we're specialists at, and it's made the shop run much more efficiently. So that's one of the big things that I've always struggled with, and I found a good solution through the P2 group.
Hello, listeners. This is Heather Mason, NBDA president. My guest today is Matthew Smith, a 27-year industry veteran, past retailer and brand leader. I had him on the podcast. Great conversation. We talked about ways for retailers to maximize current opportunities, plan for the future. It seems that there's a lot of pressures right now on both suppliers and retailers. We talked about collaboration, how we can work united. Lots of tips in here. Let's get started. Matthew, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, Heather. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, as I was preparing for our conversation, I could not believe that our paths have yet to cross, to be honest,
Right. It seems like we would find each other at the very least on the East Coast, like hanging in a shop or at an event or something. It seems like it would have, but no, sadly for me, it hasn't. But I'd like to in the future. For sure.
Same here. So I know, I know that you're excited to be on the podcast. I don't know if you're aware that our retailers, our members, I'm always asking them, what can we do for you? If you have ideas, let us know. And one of our retailer members actually reached out to me and said, you've got to have Matthew on the podcast. So that's really cool.
Maybe a little overkind on their part, but yeah, I love bicycle retailers. I was one way back in the beginning of my career in the bicycle industry, and I have such an admiration for them. It's many of my greatest friends, of course, are retailers, and of course business associates. But I just really love the risks combined with the passion. It's such a unique industry, and bicycle retailers don't do it like it seems like anybody else. It's so unique.
And you have spent 27 or so years in this industry. I mean, you have made a career in leading roles, Orbea, US e-bike manager for Giant Bicycle, Bianchi USA. So I thought it would be fun just to, dig into your perspective on the environment today, where retailers, can get some wins and maybe some best strategies. But yeah, I mean, let's talk about just your history in the industry a little bit. Did you ever did you want to become in the bicycle industry when you were a little kid?
No. What's really funny is that I was talking to my old boss at Orbea. He's retired now, and he's traveling around Europe in his caravan, as they call them. And we were chatting, and we realized that both of us ended up in bicycle retail, and then eventually on the wholesale side of it by accident, totally by accident. He was a mechanical engineer. I'm actually I have like a double major, 2 degrees undergraduate, neither of which really apply to the bike industry, although you might say they do. And it was just accidental. I was a bike racer. You've heard this story 1,000 times, and I loved bicycles since I was a little kid, but I never thought about the business side of it. And then I was living in Hanover, New Hampshire. I was working in an outdoor store there, and then I moved to Colorado after that, and I was also working at an outdoor store there. And I was on a ride, got a flat, went to my old college bike shop, and he asked me if I wanted to manage it because I'd been managing outdoor stores, and I was like, yes, yes, I do. And here I am, 27 years later. So very, very haphazard, very happenstance, but also delightful. I feel very lucky.
I think the industry is really lucky. I was talking to several people who do know you, and there's a certain thread that kept coming up, and that's dedicated to dealers, dedicated to servicing and making sure your dealers were taken care of. How do you get
Yeah,
that quality? Like that not everyone has that, you know, like not everyone is willing to go above and beyond.
actually, at one point, I had a sales manager who almost fired me for that quality. That's funny that you might have unearthed that. Because there is no industry without dealers. Since the internet happened, there's been this underlying fear that dealers would go away, that dealers would become less relevant. And what we've seen is every brand, you know, I can remember years ago when Canyon was first launching, there was this idea that Canyon was going to be the beginning of the end. And I love Canyon. Canyon is a cool brand, but it didn't have much of it, if any, effect on dealers. Direct to consumer is an important part of what everybody's strategy is, or should be, but it doesn't take away from dealers. You have to have the people that can help you mechanically with the bike. And one thing we forget that I think about a lot is this idea of the beginner's mindset. There are so many people who come to bike shops, who walk into bike shops, who look at bike magazines, who are trying to start in our industry, whether as consumers or as even maybe people who would work there. And we forget how much we know. And I think it kind of handicaps us because we know so much that we forget that all of us in some way are beginners. And being a beginner is exciting and it's wonderful, but it's also scary.
Yeah.
And without a bike shop to navigate the scariness of it, people aren't as successful. It's just different. I'm sure there's plenty of people that don't need bike shops. That's great, but the vast majority of us do, and they're so important. And yeah, I don't know. I just think dealers are very brave, especially during rough times like the industry is having right now.
Yeah.
There's a courage there.
There is a courage, right? And I'm definitely resonating with what you're saying about it's hard sometimes to look at the store or the way we're interacting with customers from like a different perspective because we're in it so deeply. Like it's just challenging to do that. You worked with Orbea, Bianchi, Giant. You've worked with so many retailers. I know you've personally visited retailers. You've helped them improve their business. Just from the mindset of being a brand manager or someone in a leading role at a brand, how important is that relationship with the retailer? You know, and I know that might be changing, or some people could say it's changing, but I think let me rephrase that. I think you put a lot of importance on it. Maybe why did you?
Well, there's so many reasons. There's strategic reasons. There's personal relationships. There's a lot of different reasons why the relationship for a brand with a dealer is important. If you just look at a great example is Giant. I work there, so I'm a little biased. I think what they're doing is great, but they're definitely working very hard to separate themselves in the way maybe a few other big brands are working. And I think what's most interesting about that is that if you talk to anybody at Giant, they are over the moon about dealers. They want to bring as many services, as much value to the relationship as they can. It always seems to start and end with margin, and margin. But I think there's more to it. You know, you see a lot of dealers are successful with brands that don't have great margin, and you wonder why. When you trace it back, it's always relationship. It's always the depth of the relationship or the way they feel taken care of. Sometimes it's just because the brand sells, right? You have hot brands that seem to sell themselves. But by and large, it comes down to service. And I think as we go along and as we get even deeper into e-mobility with e-bikes and electric vehicles, I think you're going to see service become even more important. Dealers are going to have to up their game, but brands are going to have to up their game. And if the two don't work together, this major part, I mean, I read an article recently that said Germany was 55% e-bikes at this point.
Yeah.
55%. And we are approaching more than, I think, 30 or 35. So it's big for us too, in terms of the average mix in the dealer's sales, annual sales. So as the platforms get more complicated, the brand is more and more important every day. But based on how many times I've had consumers try to call direct and work through things directly, that interface with a dealer is just, it's invaluable.
Yeah.
And every dealer is different. What makes them happy, what levers that need to be pulled are different. Sometimes they're the same. Obviously, like I was saying, margin. But I think it goes deeper than that. I think so many brands are about more than just the dollars. And I think that's really important. You see reps who've been in the industry and have had relationships for 30 years with dealers. And, I remember when I was at a first starting at bike shops, we had a rep that it didn't matter what he sold. If he sold it, we bought it. There was trust there. There was admiration. There was a high level of service. And I think that sometimes that does get lost, especially in this transition to e-mobility. I think that's been lost. And I'm going to call out one particular vendor who I think is doing an excellent job, Bosch.
Mm-hmm.
I think Claudia and the team over at Bosch, I think they're all about dealer support. And I think they get it right. And that's an example. I still think there's a lot they could do. But I think that's an example of how the vendor needs the dealer more than ever. And it's super positive.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you called out their rider support. So as we look to take care of the continuing growing diverse demographic of riders, we need to work united, retailers and suppliers, to make sure that these riders are on product that is properly tuned and ready to go. And it's hard to do that through a computer. So the importance of the retailer in person. And I love, Matthew, how you pulled up the diverse needs of the retailer. And I sympathize with that as a past representative, brand manager, working directly with retailers. There are programs, but not one program fits all, and having that relationship and that open communication. So anyone who's listeners, pick up the phone. If you're on the vendor side, the supplier side, call your partners and figure out what your retailers need from you. And if you're a retailer, call your supplier and ask, because forming those open relationships are going to help. I'm Matthew, e-bike. So not long ago, working with Giant as e-bike manager, in a time where we were seeing very high growth in our industry. What are you seeing for trends? I think the article you mentioned, I just read myself this morning. I think we're growing. I'm expecting this to double, in the coming 5 years or so in the US. What do you see?
I don't think every category will double. I think that many will. It can seem like we're saturated. I can say that we're oversaturated with brands right now. I think there's too many e-bike brands, and when I say too many, if any of your listeners are reading the Rick Vosper Bicycle Retail and Industry News articles, I think I think Vosper gets it right, if not all the time, almost all the time. And he talks about perfect competition. And I think in the e-bike sector, we're very far away from perfect competition. We have too many brands. It's driving prices down. It's causing service headaches. And it's ironic because I think part of the problem might be some legislative and some standards issues.
Mhm.
And I think, and that's actually what I would like to say in terms of challenges. That's where the dealers are stuck. Regulatory issues, dealers have a lot to do. Primarily, take care of the person that walks through their door. I think it is on the supplier side to make sure that all the regulatory issues are clear and clean and easy. And I don't think that suppliers have, and I know why, but they may not have kept up with that as much as they could. So I think the 2849, the UL 2849 is a great example of how retailers have responded in a positive way, saying, you know, and I believe the NVDA is behind this effort as well to say, look, if it's not UL 2849, be wary, be very wary of it, right?
Yeah.
And that's just one issue, and it shouldn't be, right? I don't think any of us worry of what UL our TV is or what UL our computer monitor is or our laptop, but they all do have certifications for safety's sake. And when you're talking about mobility, something on two wheels, it's even more important. And so that's one way to weed out a lot of the fluff out there in terms of brands. It can be really interesting because of margin, because of selection, because of possible consumer desire to try to get a hold of some of these brands. But I think in the end, I think that the competition that Vosper talks about is very much served by most of the current brands we have. You know, there's going to be some new ones, and some are always going to go away. But I think retailers in the e-mobility space have to be really careful with that. And I think when they are, that's when you see the business really thrive.
Right.
They become a hub because e-bikes are an opportunity for more touch points for the dealer with consumers. They're more complicated. There's more to do. When things go wrong, they definitely are more difficult to do from the consumer side. So it's a huge opportunity for dealers. But they have to have a partner on the other side, as you said, on the other side of the phone, or that comes in to see them, or hopefully not, but through a chatbot, that they get service. And I think that the majority of the dealers, or excuse me, the majority of the vendors that are out there right now are excellent. Not all of them, but most of them. And I think dealers have done themselves a good service, and I think that will help their business grow to the point where e-bikes could be at least 50% of their business. I think doubling might be hard because that approaches the 60% number. So not sure about that, but if you had a mix of 50% e-mobility combined with there's so many different names, analog, acoustic. My favorite is the Euro description, muscular bikes. If you have muscular bikes on the floor, ooh, I just think it's funny, especially when you do it with a European accent like Spanish or Italian, muscala. Having the muscular bikes. So I think if you have that mix, you're healthy, right? And I don't think it matters what categories you have, just that number is approaching 50%. Then you're entrenched, then you're in the community, then you're the go-to spot, and then you're making really good inroads as far as profit and as far as revenue.
Yeah, some fabulous touch points you picked up on there, and I'm hopeful that we can get some regulatory issues out of the way and work on infrastructure, because more safe places to ride, more dedicated lanes, that'll help as well. So I'm definitely glad you brought those points up. You know, in preparing for the conversation today, you and I chatted a little bit just about the current state of the industry, opportunities and challenges. And I thought if we could just dive into those segments, that might be interesting, especially from your vantage point, having been in the industry for so long. I mean, how do you think we're doing right now? Like, just
I think I think we're in the ending period of a long hangover from the pandemic challenges and opportunities. Right? Pandemic felt like a challenge, and then it felt like a huge opportunity because it felt to many dealers, especially that I talked to, that whatever wasn't nailed down was selling. I certainly can say from a supplier side, it felt that way. The pandemic was both horrible and awesome in so many ways, but for whatever reason, and it's not my place to go into the whys of it, we had an oversaturation of inventory, and it seems like a slowdown. But I'll go back to Mr. Vosper. If you look at his dealer surveys, most dealers are saying that they have healthy inventory levels. Most dealers are saying that they have not pandemic levels of foot traffic, but close to 2019 levels of foot traffic. And that's really what dealers need to use as their benchmark, not 2020 through 23, but 2019 to 2024. That's a better benchmark to look at in terms of revenue, in terms of monthly. Maybe the only thing that you could really say change would be the categories. Possibly some categories have changed, like e-bikes. More e-bikes are being sold, right? But I think it's really important for dealers in this moment to be very wary of inventory, right? It stinks. It means that whatever inventory is still in the warehouses for the suppliers, it means those prices are going to continue to be driven down. Yep. That's okay. That's okay, right? As long as that doesn't hurt the retailer, that's the most important thing. There's pain on both sides always in situations like this. But we'll go 15 years where the retailer doesn't feel like they have power. Right now, the retailer has all the power, all of it, because suppliers have too much stuff. And the retailer can pick and choose exactly what they want, what they need. And the retailer should always be in the driver's seat. And there's lots of opinions on why they're not in this industry. But I think that this is an opportunity, something I sent you in the notes when we were going back and forth. This is a perfect opportunity for the retailers to become the brand. You know, Joe's Bike Shop should be the brand. Mm-hmm. The brands that are sold inside Joe's Bike Shop should be endorsed by Joe or Jane's Bike Shop. Let's say Jane's Bike Shop. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the shop is the brand. And, you know, there's lots of different approaches. Again, there's no cookie cutter, but every shop that I see that makes themselves the brand and what they sell secondary to their brand is always more wildly successful than the brands that than the shop brands that get consumed by the brand they sell. And I think that challenge is particularly difficult right now because of devalued inventory on the supplier side.
Matthew, when you say the retailer should be in the driver's seat, I mean, those are strong words coming from a person who created, I mean, I would assume you took part in or had a role in creating dealer programs. So are you saying the retailers should tell the suppliers what they want? Like, I can't put X amount on my floor, but I still want to be a dealer. Are you? Yes. Yeah.
Yes. I think that any brand. So it's two things, right? I believe, and I'm not alone. I've talked to hundreds, maybe thousands of people in the industry that believe this, that if you're going to represent a brand, represent a brand. You know, like if you're in Florida, you probably don't need a whole lot of all-wheel drive. You know, in your car dealer in Florida, you don't need a bunch of all-wheel drive snow vehicles, right? And if you're in Colorado, you probably don't need a whole lot of coupes. You know, two-seater cars that are rear-wheel drive, right? Like there's different things for different dealers, and there should always be variation. But in the end, you should represent a brand. But what does that mean? For every shop, that's different. I've seen shops that have 50 brands, it seems, and they cherry pick every one of them. Mm-hmm. And it's a frustrating experience for the consumer when they go in and do that. I've seen shops that only have one brand, That's also a frustrating experience for a consumer, right? Because and a dealer, because if you have, I've always felt that you have to have at least two bike brands, right? But even beyond bikes, parts, accessories, clothing, uh, um, inventory management is key, and your partner should work with you to manage your inventory. They should be a part of your store success, and it shouldn't be an adversarial relationship. And if you do a survey of the top 200 dealers revenue-wise in the United States, I can guarantee you, even with their top suppliers, many of them will feel it's adversarial, and it shouldn't be that way, right? It should be a I hate this word in business, but a synergistic. I mean, it really should be a situation where there's a blending of interests, and both people head in the same direction. Because if the dealer suddenly stops selling, goes out of business, can't pay their bills, that's not good for the supplier. And if the supplier is too onerous and the dealer switches teams, that's not good for the supplier. So there's many retailers that do it well, but I still think there's an adversarial side to it. And this is a moment for dealers to kind of pull back some of that, I think, and get away from it being adversarial and more of a my success is your success, because that's how it should always be.
So I love this conversation. I mean, we're talking about partnerships, and we could talk about margins, service support, products, marketing, community engagement. How do we make these partnerships most successful? Is it really communication, Matthew? Like, is that at the heart of it?
Well, there every brand has a strength, right? Just like every retailer has a strength. Some retailers will be mom and pop. They sell BMX bikes, they sell hybrid bikes, they sell cruisers. They don't sell a lot of $10,000, $20,000 road bikes, mountain bikes. But then there'll be the specialty shops that sell those all day long. Then there's shops that can do it all. You have brands that drive consumer interest. You have brands that don't. They don't have huge marketing budgets to drive consumer interest. I think it all goes down to effort. So if effort means communication, for sure. If effort means comprehension, what I always used to talk about, especially when I was trying to transform Orbea. Orbea went through this interesting stage when I was there, where we had to transform from a road bike company to a road and mountain bike and gravel and in all categories company. But most especially, we had to convince people that we had cool mountain bikes. If you go to the market now, if you're a new consumer now, it would seem like Orbea has been a cool mountain bike forever.
I was gonna say, you did it. Like, high five. I'm with you.
And I'm not going to say I did it, but there was a team of people that were really smart. I will call out one guy, Jordan Hookey. He was my marketing guy. He also worked as the creative director for the whole brand globally. And I'd put him near genius status, just an incredible colleague. And we thought about it all the time. How could we do this? And what we came up with for 4 years, we hammered home the idea of dealer comprehension. Does the dealer comprehend the brand? And what does comprehension mean? Well, you talk about reading comprehension or math comprehension. It's the same thing. Does the dealer truly understand the program, the benefits, and the ways that it helps them and the ways that it might challenge them? Does the dealer understand all of the brand product offerings? Does the dealer understand where the brand is coming from, what they design to, and why they make the bikes that they make, or the helmets that they make, or the shoes that they make? Brand comprehension is often, I actually hadn't ever heard it talked about before, but I feel like it's number one. And the dealers who truly get brands, who are embedded with them, who have open lines of communication, but also do a lot on their own, who learn, who make sure their staff is trained. One of my most frustrating things, I'm kind of a techie. I'm a little bit of an electronics geek. And there is not a retail store that I can go to where the retail store knows more than me. But I can guarantee you that's not the case with nearly anybody in bikes. Because if you're not on the retail floor, if you're not a retailer, bikes change so fast and technology changes so fast, you need to have that dealer. But if your staff and your reps aren't educating each other and aren't out there making sure that everybody has that brand comprehension, you're behind the ball. It's hard. It can be expensive. At one point, there was a dealer in Arizona. The Arizona dealers will know who I'm talking about, who encouraged clinics for the reps to come. In fact, they required them, and then they warned the brands that if the clinic was bad, boring, or non-educational, they were going to charge the brand. They were going to send an invoice to the brand for all of the time that they had to pay their employees to be there. They had 60 employees. So if you were there for an hour, 2 hour clinic, that was $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. And they did it. They were serious about it.
Wow.
I love that. Don't waste our time. But then they had to make sure they didn't waste your time either, right? So you know, with tools like Miyagi and some of the other online education platforms, getting your staff up to speed and comprehending the brand is easier than ever. But it's still a huge challenge. Challenge. And so I think brand comprehension is the number one thing dealers can do to make sure that their partnership with the brand is at the highest level it can be.
Yeah, and I'm gonna just throw out one more challenge from my seat and say that brands and suppliers should also have retailer comprehension. So like if we're looking for a partnership, right? Like why is this retailer here? What's the history? And I'm not trying to like, I'm just like, let's, you know what I mean? I think that's good. It has to go both ways, right?
Absolutely. And that goes back to the cookie cutter. You know, like for instance, for the longest time in this industry, we've had tiered programs. It's actually one of the reasons I loved working with Giant so much. They really don't have tiered programs. They have like, you're an all Giant shop or you're not. And you get a couple extra margin points if you're an all Giant shop. But for the most part, you still get an amazing margin. You get amazing benefits. And that was something I really admired about the way they created it. You know, that same year, 2021 and 22 that I was with Giant, we saw some other companies' programs. Man, were they complex and convoluted. You know, if you paid early, you got 3% net 10, blah, blah. It was so, yeah. And you're like, what's the real margin? What do I pay? What do I get? You know, and I think that you're absolutely right. However, sometimes dealers create those, brands create those programs because of the way their factories work or because of the way their deliveries work. There's lots of reasons, but it never gets explained very well.
Right.
And that is actually something that I tried really hard to do was, I've often encountered people in business who like to hold information cards close to their chest, like to be the gatekeeper. I can't stand gatekeeping.
You love those people.
Right. Any information you can get to your people. Obviously, there's things you can't share, like you can't put out new product ideas too soon because it'll devalue the current, and you don't want that, especially with consumers, right? But if you have information, spread it, shout it from the rooftops, get everybody aligned with it. It's hard. I mean, some brands really could do an internal audit and find that they need to do a better job of educating their retailers. The other thing, and I'll be honest, retailers have to let brands educate them. I mean, since the demise of Interbike, the best tool brands have to educate are annual meetings. Come visit us, come spend time with us. And so many dealers won't make time for it. And it's frustrating because as good as a field rep is, or as good as Miyagi might be, there's nothing better than sitting in a room with other dealers for a day or 2 days. You can find out what works. You might walk into a retailer or a brand meeting like, gosh, it's not working. I don't know if I'm going to keep this brand. and the retailer next to you says, "Oh, we have that exact problem. Here's what we did."
Mhm.
Suddenly you have ideas. One of the things I really love about what you're doing with the NBDA, there's more meetings than ever. There's more communication than ever. I'm seeing presence at the NBDA level that I didn't see 10 years ago. I didn't see 5 years ago. I mean, kudos to you and your team. It's
Thank
excellent.
you. Thank you.
And um, dealers and suppliers by nature kind of have to be a skosh adversarial, just like 2%, 5%. But the rest of the time they need to be in concert. And as good as digital tools are, we're on one today. I'd still prefer to be sitting there having a coffee with you over a microphone talking about this.
Oh yeah.
It would be better.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I agree. Matthew, you talked about the retailer being the brand. It's, they've got the brands they sell, but they could really benefit from effectively positioning themselves as the brand in their customers' eyes. Is there any retailers that you've seen do this well? And maybe not, you don't need to mention the retailer's name, but what did they do? Just for our listeners who are thinking about how I can
Am I
position.
allowed? Am I allowed to mention the
Oh,
retailer's
yeah,
name?
yeah, you can
Because
if
it
you
might
want.
help.
Yeah,
My favorite one, because it's the easiest and most accessible one, is Poison Spider Bicycle.
okay.
If you travel to Moab, Poison Spider is already famous. But if you go into Moab, go to Poison Spider, you're going to see Dakine, you're going to see Troy Lee, but everything in there has Poison Spider branding on it. Everything, gloves, helmets. I think there might even be some shoes, t-shirts, riding gear, anything related that they would sell that's not already that's not a Shimano derailleur or a Trek bicycle or a Santa, whatever, Yeti or whatever. I don't know if they sell Santa Cruz, but my point is that they make the entire experience about their brand. They are the ones who choose Yeti. They curate their rental fleet. They curate what they sell. And it's through the eyes of their staff and their experiences that anything gets chosen to be put on the floor. They sell that message very loud. They shout it from the rooftops, and I love it. And I think they're probably the most singular. Wheel and Sprocket up there in Wisconsin does an amazing job of the same thing. I mean, there's examples all over the place. University Bicycles in Boulder, Colorado is another one that does an exceptional job of making sure that university is the brand. And it can be coffee mugs branded with university bikes or Jane's Bike Shop. It doesn't matter. But when a consumer walks in there, it's all about another one that does a really great job, even though it's funny, they're owned by a supplier, is Mike's Bike.
Yeah, yep.
Mike's Bikes does an excellent job of all their floors look like Mike's Bikes, even though for many years they were primarily one brand. It still was unique to them. And I think that's powerful. And I think you certainly can't argue with the success of these retailers that I've mentioned. They do a great job. They have high revenue. But more importantly, for what revenue they have fantastic profit margins.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in thousands of retailers, and I would say the retailers that, maybe have specific colors that are like a theme in their store that are also connected to the branded merchandise that they're selling. It makes me feel like I'm in a special place. It's not just another store. I'm not looking at the Specialized or the Trek or the Giant. More, I'm just looking at this unique store and the place I'm in. And then I want to buy a hat or some cool t-shirt or something. So,
and to be sure, these big brand partners don't want you to do that. They want your store to be their store. But in the end, they really won't care if your turnover is high. If your inventory is managed, if you pay your bills on time, they won't care. What they really care about is having excellent sell-through. Because again, if the dealer is happy, the supplier is happy, and it's reflexive. And whenever I'm asked, I tell dealers, don't sell anything that could have your brand on it but doesn't. don't even sell it. Just don't. And they're like, well, but and there's always a but as to why. And I'm like, I get it, the temptation, the coolness of the brand, but in the end, the person in your community is coming to you. They're not coming to the brand.
Right.
99 times out of, even if a brand drove a consumer into your store, they're in your store. They're your customer. And I think that this idea of direct to consumer, there's a lot of fear around whether the customer would remain the dealers. But time and time again, and some of the direct to consumer brands have proven it. They can't offer the same level of service and knowledge and advice. And to be honest, security. There's a security in being a bike dealer with a consumer relationship. Doesn't feel that way. Sometimes it feels like these consumers are not loyal to us, blah, blah. There's all kinds of things. But in the end, the consumers need the dealers. Bikes are not something that can be just put together on the fly. They really aren't. They're complex machines. They're not as complex as a car, but they're certainly not as simple as a pair of skis. Even skis. I mean, if you want to mount binding, you really can't do it yourself. Got to bring it in. Otherwise, if you have an accident, you're not covered.
Right.
And, that's another thing that dealers often don't think about is liability. And back to something you asked me about earlier, opportunities in the e-bike space. A lot of opportunities in the e-bike space, especially for low-priced, high-margin deals. When you look at those, make sure there's indemnification for the dealer every single time.
Yeah.
Because if there's not, I can't ever remember the saying, but a good deal today is a sour taste tomorrow or something.
Right. Like you jump
Something
on
like
a good
that.
deal and then we have just a little bit of time here, and I think I'd be remiss not to ask you about just your thoughts on navigating the inventory right now. Several retailers are trying to work through their inventory, as are brands and suppliers, and we see discounting happening, but any tips for retailers trying to navigate inventory right now? I think you might have mentioned to reduce inventory, but maybe I heard that wrong. I don't know. Just any tips?
Inventory is volatile, right? So, I could never say blanket reduce your inventory.
Yeah, right.
What I would say is control your inventory. Have this is the time when your inventory needs to be under the tightest control it can be. One thing that's really important is, unless you are a closeout specialist, make sure you stay in the latest, greatest game. Your job as a dealer is to be in the latest, greatest, because most of the time, after a model year or an inventory year goes 1 or 2 years past, there's so many different avenues to get it. You end up being a price matching, and you don't want to do that, right? So controlling inventory is very important. Owning inventory, meaning you don't owe anybody any money for your inventory. That's super important. If a brand won't help you out, if you have old inventory and a brand won't help you out because they still have that inventory and they're discounting it on their website this amount, they should be helping you with invoice revision. Absolutely. And if they're not, ask them why. Why not? Well, it's really important. This goes back to that partnership idea. So I would say that dealers should be in the latest, greatest business, unless they're specialists in closeout, as much as possible. And they should use the inventory problem to their advantage. Be happy to sell them a discount, but it might not be on the floor. I'll check and see if it's in the warehouse. It's really because, again, even if they're able to get it direct or through the internet, it still has to be built, it still has to be fitted. There's still so many services dealers can offer. Right. So for me, if I was a retailer today, and having talked to so many retailers recently, the ones that are thriving, I actually just had a really great conversation with a dealer in Denver who's killing it right now. And what they're saying is, we're only stocking, cutting edge they're very high-end mountain bike store. They're only stocking what they know is really great new product, and then they're taking advantage of all the inventory reduction sales to get people into new old stock if that's the right fit.
Yeah.
And same thing goes the margin situation on the new old stock. If somebody walks in, they say, "Hey, I saw this for sale for $17.99 on so and so's website," but you don't have it in stock, but you can get it from the supplier. Make sure you're making your full margin on that. If you're not, it's kind of okay because it was a walk-in sale. But again, most brands are offering really good margin on new old stock. Take advantage of it. Don't stock it.
Yeah.
Because new old stock is still new old stock. It's not getting more valuable as time goes by.
Right.
So
right.
I think that being in the latest greatest biz, taking advantage of those sales to order in what you need, and a lot of common sense dealers do this. But sometimes it can be really, oh my gosh, they're offering.
Tempting.
Somebody was offering 250-day terms on new old stock plus a discount. And suddenly you get stars in your eyes. Like, I could get 10 of those, probably sell them. If ever in your inventory conversation the word probably comes in there, think twice. Think twice
about probably. I love it. It's good advice. It's simple, but right when that offer's in front of you, it can be very, very, very tempting.
Yeah.
Just opportunities in general. I mean, we've covered a lot here. Just from your viewpoint, if you were a retailer, what are maybe 3 things you'd be focused on for the second half of 2024?
First thing I would do is I would make sure that my bike shop was the most welcoming space I could imagine. Think about a 90-year-old grandmother walking into your bike store. Would they be able to navigate your store without help? If not, think again. Try again. It should be the easiest, most welcoming place. And I can tell you, even some of the best retailers who do the highest revenue are not welcoming places. They're actually quite intimidating. That's really the number one thing I would tell retailers. The second thing I would tell retailers, whenever possible, it sounds like I'm a real estate agent. Own your building, own your inventory, own everything you can. Third, if you think you're as far into the community as you can get, think again. You can get more intertwined with your local community. You might not see the opportunities. You might need community members. How often are retailers hosting a town hall meeting with their communities just to find out what they can do better? Just to find out what they can do more of. Even if none of the ideas but one hit or land, that's an idea you didn't have before.
Right.
It's really important. So I think having the most welcoming, wonderful retail space, having all of your expenses, your operating expenses aren't growing huge, but like rent is increasing, certain little things are increasing. So having a tight control on all your expenses is really important. But then community. If you're ingrained in the community will see you through tough times. But if the community doesn't really know you, you're not leading group rides, you're not on all kinds of beginner rides, you're not offering all the simple things that especially were gone during the pandemic. Bring that stuff back. Bring the in-person engagement back. It's huge.
And in your current role, I know you're still working with e-bikes.
I'm actually working with all brands. I'm consulting. So yeah.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. Yeah. What a great role for you. You must be loving that.
Sometimes at the end of the month, it's like, well, light month, but just like a retailer, I got to roll with it. It's a new challenge. I'm excited for it.
You expect some more swings to come, right? Some more swings for the remainder of this year, maybe. Do you think going to stabilize?
Actually, when you look at dealer inventory, it's stable. That's the most important thing. Supplier inventory is not stable. And there's so much of it, it's going to take us a while to get through it. Which is why I say retailers should use it to their advantage. We predicted that we would be out of this by third quarter 24. Not the case, not even remotely. We're at the end of second quarter 24, excuse me, third quarter 23, and we're at the second quarter of 24, and we're still not out of it. Are we better? Yeah, but it's moving slowly. There's lots of reasons why, and every brand is different as to why it's moving slowly. But the suppliers can't force you to take things that you can't sell.
Yeah.
So just batten down the hatches, as I know so many retailers already have. But it's not a bad time. This is an opportunistic time. It's a time to make your local investment better, make your engagement have more traction, have higher return on investment. I think that's what we really need to do.
I agree with you. And I love how, from your standpoint, you worked with so many brands. You're here advocating for the retailer, and that means
Always.
a lot. That's amazing. And I think the message is really strong and really clear. Create a welcoming environment, remove barriers to do business with you, manage that inventory. You are the brand, connect with your community. I mean, these are things we think would be like things we would know, right? But we need to double down on those right now.
It can feel like there's a lot of pressure when consumers come in and they want X brand of bike and you don't carry it. So you want to order one and the brand wants you to order 30. There's a lot of pressure. Sometimes it's okay to not be all things to all people. Pick your niche, stick to it. Even if your niche is really broad, stick to it and maximize the potential of where you invest. It does seem simple, but it's not simple at all. That's why I admire retailers so much, and that's why I am advocating for them, because it's hard, it's risky, but it's also super rewarding. I don't know anybody that's like, I make testing equipment for large scale electronics. It's like, but I can't wait to go on the weekend and go see my large scale electronics testing equipment person. But you have a great shop with great community engagement. Your customers are coming to see you even when they don't have to. Strictly Bicycles in New York. They do an amazing job. People come and just have coffee.
Yep, they just like to hang out there before the ride, after the ride, or just be in the environment.
Yeah, they just sit there, and I also have great coffee.
Yeah.
I love the coffee. I don't drink coffee, which is really ironic, but I love the coffee cycling combo. Those are always some of my favorite shops.
It goes together well. Well, Matthew, if we have some listeners who maybe want to connect with you, maybe some brands want to consult with you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
My LinkedIn profile, it's just Matthew Smith. I know Smith is
show notes. Yeah, I'll do that.
Worst last name ever. But if you just put Matthew Smith Bicycle, I'll be the only. There's like 3 of us, and I'll be the one that comes up first. But you can put my email out there, even my phone number. It's fine. I would love, even if a retailer just wants to pick my brain, give me a shout. I want to help.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time and sharing.
Thank you, Heather.
In a very authentic conversation. We're lucky.
And I want to reiterate how grateful we all are for what you're doing in transforming the NBDA.
Thank you.
It's different with the way your leadership is handling it, and it's better. And I just want to congratulate you again on that, and just tell you that if you ever need help with that, let me know. But what you're doing is so important, and it's got more momentum than I've seen in decades. So bravo, and I can't wait to see what you do.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you for listening to Bicycle Retail Radio. This podcast is designed specifically for the bicycle industry, dedicated to strengthening our retailers and cycling community. If it is your first episode, we urge you to take the time and listen to our past episodes.